So, welcome to this episode of Menopause Conversations. I'm actually joined by a wonderful guest today. I'm joined by my friend Caren Gamble. Caren is an autism consultant and mentor, and she works with her son at Caren Gamble Autism Consultancy, and they are an amazing duo. I had the pleasure of meeting Caren at a meeting where we were talking about menopause, menstruation, and just felt she would be a perfect guest to have on to talk with me about the topic of neurodivergent people and hormones. So, welcome, Caren. Lovely to see you.
Well, thank you, Amantha, for asking me. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So, what I'm going to do, Caren, is I'm going to just give a few stats and then I'd love it if you tell people actually how is it that you've arrived in this space. So, because we're going to talk about neurodivergent people, and I'm very careful to use that definition. And if you help me out here, why am we saying neurodivergent people or neurodivergent women rather than neurodiverse, Caren?
Neurodiverse is what we all are, because we are all diverse in our thinking and our personalities. But neurodivergent is what actually diverges from that. So it's been different,
Yeah,
so
I
to
love
speak.
that, being different. So if we talk about neurodivergence as a whole, just momentarily, that encompasses conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and more in the UK. So that is almost become like an umbrella term, but we're using a different term because we feel that's actually more respectful to people. But it's estimated, and I think this is massively underestimated, that represents 15% of the population is neurodivergent.
Massively, yes.
There's some really interesting stats, Karen. See what you make of this. That it's very difficult to get specific stats, but neurodivergent women over 30, we don't have much data on them. But what we do know is since April 2023 and March 2024, nearly 280,000 individuals were prescribed medication for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or AU. HD. So the reality is that's an 18 to 20% increase year on
Yep.
year. So, there's a massive surge taking place between people between the age of 25 and 40. I mean, Tony Blair on record quite recently has said, I wish we'd stop talking about mental health, which I don't think is very helpful. I think that shows an ignorance and a lack of understanding actually what it's like to live as a neurodivergent person. But what we know is that women over 50 are identifying more with the topic of being neurodivergent. So, Caren, tell us a little bit about you, how you find yourself in this space, and if there's any personal elements you can add in, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I think I need to just tell a little bit of a background info, because my son and I, we work together because he is diagnosed autistic since he was 8 years old. He has gone through all the challenges of mainstream education. I supported him in that. And then when it came to employment, he had a very bad experience. And out of that experience, we took the positive opportunity to start our consultancy, to actually lead by example and show employers, schools, educational institutions how it's done, how they should deal with neurodivergent pupils, staff members. So just a little bit of background
Mm.
information there. Um, I, um, um, I am aware that I am autistic, and this came to light on working with Callum, because he has always said for years, Mum, you are autistic. And I didn't believe him. I knew I was different, but I didn't believe him because I was very good at masking. That is what women do. And all the diagnostic criteria out there, I know a lot about diagnostic criteria through Callum. I went through the diagnosis with him at the time as his mother, and they just didn't apply to me. But women present completely different. And I think that is about to change. But I have since then gone through the process of online assessments, and I score very highly on the autistic rate. And by the way, AUHD is if you're autistic and you have ADHD. And I have ADHD as well, so I have both. So that's how I found myself in this space. And when I sort of accepted, embraced it, I should say, that I was AUHD, I was in my 50s. So
Wow.
and so at the same time, I started menopausal symptoms, but I didn't realize that I started menopausal symptoms. And I'm here today because you have asked me to share my journey, really, of AUHD and menopause. And there is a little bit of a background story as well, and that relates to how I treated my AUHD symptoms in the past, and that was medicating with alcohol. Because one of the traits that I have is that my head is always, I call it, my head is always switched on full volume. And that
Yes.
is not just that I take in everything that is said around me. When somebody talks to me, there's another conversation going on. I listen to all three conversations. And you can imagine it's like a pressure cooker. Also, at the same time, I'm thinking about what am I going to cook tomorrow? What am I going to do in my business? And what do I need to prepare for maybe in 10 months' time for something, just to give you a very exaggerated picture. But that is how my head is. It's constantly going. And the only way, and that was, I must say, 20 years ago, I could shut that up was by drinking alcohol. But unfortunately, I got dependent on alcohol, and I had to stop drinking. But once I realized that I was self-medicating with alcohol, and that was the reason, I was able to stop. And I never had any cravings or anything, because that realization, the explanation that that was what I was doing, was actually, and it was negatively affecting my health, that was enough for me to just stop. And it sounds very sort of easy. It was easy for me. For other people, it may not be as easy, but it's finding a substitute. For me, that is reading. Reading a book. Immediately when I get into the space where I get overwhelmed, I grab a book and I read, and I'm immediately in that space, in that healthy space that takes me away from everything. And I have that as a sort of a substitute for the alcohol dependence. So yeah, just a little bit of a background there. Now, with regards to menopause, when I came to the stage, to the age where I became menopausal, I didn't realize that I was menopausal. I just thought my autism is getting worse. And that was actually supported by my husband, who kept complaining, your autism is getting worse. And so you just believe it, and you never really think about, you always hear about hot flushes and that women get. And at that time, I didn't have any hot flushes, but I had the emotional instability. I had the executive functioning issues, and I had the sensory overwhelm. And that got worse and worse. Just to give examples, sensory overwhelm, of course, with the conversations around me, that got worse, that I just couldn't cope anymore. I was isolating myself socially. I just didn't want to go out anymore because I could not bear it to be in company. Then I started also having certain noises which I didn't really have before. They irritated me, but not to the point that I could not focus on anything else. And that were hammering noises. For example, if anybody, I work from home, I have a home office, and if anybody was doing any work around, I could not hold any meetings, any Zoom meetings. I could not think, I could not write, I couldn't do anything. Just if somebody was hammering in the neighborhood, and that didn't mean just the next door neighbor,
Mm.
I could hear it from far away. So that was unusual. Emotional regulation. I'll give you an example. I all of a sudden got hung up on really petty little things, like people parking in front of our house. And we have got, at the time we had 4 cars, because my both my son and daughter were still living at home, and it was really difficult to maneuver if anybody parked in front of our cars. But instead of just getting annoyed, like anybody's, oh, why did this person park in front of our house, I actually nearly fainted because my heart rate started increasing. I started sweating. My head started spinning, and I couldn't think. And I just was constantly at the window looking out, and to the point that I was just really annoying my family because it was ridiculous. Um, Executive functioning, brain fog, where I could not think straight anymore, whether there were noises or not. I all of a sudden couldn't think straight anymore. I was procrastinating all the time. I had really bad anxiety during the night. I woke up, I've always been a good sleeper, but I woke up during the night and had anxiety about the most ridiculous things. And that sort of came out into the day, and then that I just couldn't function anymore. I could maybe work 2 hours a day, and then after that I had to give up. And I was really getting worried. Now I came to speak to a cousin of my husband's at a family party, and she was telling me about perimenopausal symptoms. And that sounded, and I know for a fact that she is not autistic. And I thought, oh my God, that just sounds like me. But obviously she didn't have it as bad because my autism has exacerbated it. But still I thought that is actually quite eye-opening. And so I looked into it a little bit more. Then this event, No Time to Step Back, came up in September last year. So I thought, I need to go to this event. I was invited to that event, and it was just an eye-opener. The women talking openly about their experiences, and it really helped me. And I went to my doctor with a long list of symptoms, and also told her that I was neurodivergent, that I was AUHD. And I was very lucky because I got a lady doctor who was very understanding. I don't know whether she had any experience with neurodivergence and menopause, but she did have experience with menopause. And so she immediately told me what she was going to do. She put me onto combined HRT. And I've never looked back since. My symptoms have gone. I still have my my autistic challenges, but I can live a normal life again. It's my family are so relieved that they've got their mother back. Their mother, who is quirky, who is weird at times, but is not as jumpy and bouncy all the time, and irrational most of all, as I was at that time. So that's a lot to take in. So I'm sorry if I've just bombarded.
No, not at all. I think it's so important. And thank you so much for sharing. I mean, what I will add in from that hormonal perspective, we know that estrogen and progesterone have very strong links with neurotransmitters. And given that progesterone is our first sex hormone to decline first, that
Mm,
is very strongly linked to a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is all about
mm,
anti-anxiety, promoting sleep, that joy for life. It's what gets us to reproduce, progestation. Whereas estrogen is all about glutamate as a neurotransmitter, which is, high executive function, thinking quickly, doing things quickly, being very spontaneous, being very impulsive. So you can see how both of those things, when the ratios are right, that you're in balance. But actually, what we see very much in people who are neurodivergent is you actually naturally have lower levels of estrogen anyway.
yeah.
And actually, when you go through periods of your menstrual cycle, when your estrogen levels are high, your symptoms, your neurodivergent symptoms, are not as exacerbated.
Mm,
But obviously, during perimenopause, when the progesterone's dropping, so we haven't got so much calmness anyway,
mm,
then the estrogen starts dropping. Then that is
yeah.
almost like our neurodivergent symptoms are on the stage with the spotlight on them,
Yes.
and everything's exacerbated. And so I would say it's so important. Like you said, that's almost, I mean, I know that it's a clinical trial of one, but having gone on your hormone replacement therapy and seeing
Mm,
exactly that happen, which is like there's a restoration for you of that balanced ratio. Yes, the symptoms there. That's a bit like the curtain coming across the stage, and it's not so obvious. But actually, like you said, I think it's so powerful when you just said there, I felt like I got my life back again, and then that normality for you, whatever normal is for everybody. I suppose the reality is, though, Caren, I think you've probably won the lottery in terms of having a doctor who was
Exactly.
open, conscientious, knowledgeable. It isn't the
Mhm.
case for all people. So if I were to ask you, because you've brilliantly answered at least two of my questions, is
Mhm.
navigating healthcare and support. I mean, once you recognize the link, obviously, and I think thank you so much for also sharing about alcohol, because I do think people are self-medicating. And I definitely, after a difficult day at work, or,
Mhm.
I deserve a glass of wine.
Mhm.
That is an emotional crutch, whichever way you want to put it. And if you're having more after that, there's something in that we should be challenging. If what are we self-medicating with? Food, smoking, other things, gambling, sex?
Mhm.
We need to question that more. But
Absolutely.
what would you say to people who are maybe sat here thinking, because by the way, everything that you said, I mean, about the symptoms, I feel like at any one time I've got 10 tabs open in my mind or about 20 squirrels running around. I've got such an active mind, and we've spoken about this previously. Um, what strategies can we say to people who are trying to navigate the healthcare system? What can they do if maybe they aren't as lucky as you have been?
Yes. And I do realize that I have been lucky, because I've got an example where it hasn't gone so well. And
Please share. Yeah.
I just tell you that example, and then I answer your
Yeah.
question. Somebody that I know very well, she had the problem that she had different type of symptoms related to menopause, and went singularly with every symptom to the doctor, and had all the like the investigations, but they couldn't find anything. Of course not, because it was menopause, and because she was perimenopausal in her mid-40s, she didn't make the connection. The doctors didn't make the connection. She never saw all the symptoms together, and just knew that she just wasn't right. And she didn't talk about her neurodivergence either, which was another thing that perhaps was not a good idea. And so the doctors just sent her for the investigations, and in the end she came to talk to somebody who said, have you ever thought about perimenopause? But it wasn't a doctor, it was another woman. And so she then went to a doctor and said, could I be in perimenopause? And the doctor said, I don't believe so, you're in your mid-40s. I
Oh,
don't think so. So she didn't get any joy there. In the end, she paid a lot of money to go private and have all the tests, the blood tests, the hormone tests, and then got her initial prescription privately. But luckily, later on, she could go with that prescription. After 4 months, she could prove that this was working for her. So she went to her GP and said, look, I'm taking this medication, HRT, combined HRT. It's really helping me. I've been diagnosed with these hormone imbalances. Here is my blood test. And can you please prescribe this onto the NHS, on the NHS? And yes, they have done, because they
yes.
really, it's like putting the pistol onto somebody's chest and saying, here, you have to do this. So what I would say to people, try and talk openly about how you're feeling to other people, because she is a barrister, and so she didn't want to talk about this openly, because she was also embarrassed of be feeling ill all the time, thought it was
Yes.
breath as well. And so she didn't sort of talk about it openly, and then came out of frustration to talk to somebody else who she knew well, and they had gone through it. And so she got the information and then could take and run with it, really. Not run with it in the easy sense, because she couldn't get it on the NHS, which unfortunately a lot of people are not as fortunate about. I have had a good experience, but if you have a bad experience and you cannot afford to go private, in your surgery, ask to see another doctor, ask to see a woman, because they cannot be persistent, and in the end you will get the help. In fact, I actually did the same when it came to Callum's autism diagnosis. Everybody was sending me away. I'm German, so I was bringing him up bilingual. And because he wasn't talking when he was 4, everybody just said, it's because you're bringing him up bilingual, which was totally rubbish. And I knew it wasn't that. So, I kept asking for different doctors. And eventually I came to a lady doctor who was also a mother, who says, this is your mother's intuition. I'm going to send you send him
Wow.
for an assessment. But it took months and really pressurizing my surgery. So do the same with the menopause. Luckily, there is more awareness now about menopause, so they can't fob you off that easily. But please, it is worth it. Just keep on at it, keep fighting, and you will get there. That's all I can say. And talk openly about, of course, not to people on the street, but somebody you trust. Talk openly to them about your symptoms. You will always get somebody who's had something similar, who has gone through a different process maybe, but you can always take something positive out of every conversation, and it inspires your thought process as well.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you've said there, Caren. Again, I mean, there's truth and power in what you're saying. I've just written down there's a great booklet called the Menopause Support Booklet, which comes from the brilliant Diane Dancebrink and menopausesupport.co.uk. I'll put the link in the show notes. They have a brilliant symptom tracker, well, a checklist on there. And we in our workplace work encourage everybody to complete that because in fairness to GPs, they just go for oh, I heard a symptom there, depression, or I heard a symptom there, fatigue. They
Mm.
then wrap around a solution around one or two symptoms.
Yeah.
And I certainly, I mean, I think it's worth saying I found myself on the other end of that spectrum whereby I also would go with the same thing, the same thing. And in my case, it was sinus infections, Caren. I had like 13 rounds of antibiotics in
Wow.
18 months. No
Yeah.
one thought to think, hang on, I wonder what's going on there. And
Yeah.
that for me was histamine intolerance, which is another subset of symptoms that coexist
Mm.
alongside perimenopause. But instead, what happened for me, I became aware that the medical practice had actually put a code on my notes, which
Mm.
was because they couldn't find an
Mm.
underlying cause, they put me basically as worried well. And there is a code for that on the NHS. And
Wow.
so it just meant, Caren, that every medical professional that came into contact with me
Mm.
instantly was biased.
Of
And I
course.
really felt that as someone who's quite a highly sensitive person. I'm sure
Mm.
you'll resonate with this.
Yes.
Any type of rejection,
Mm.
it makes you really sensitive. So I could just tell, even when I just
Yeah.
walked in the room,
Mm.
someone was not taking me
Yeah.
seriously. I knew it was going to be a hard battle. I've even written a post today about heavy menstrual bleeding, which is something I dealt with for a lot of my time when I was raising my daughter. I had a toddler and I was bleeding every sort of 16 days for 8 days. And the doctor said to me, I think you're an anxious first time mother. I mean, talk about pin a label on somebody. But
Exactly.
but like you, Caren, I'm a fighter, and
Yeah.
nothing is going to get me going more than an injustice.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
just was not going to take that. And
Yeah.
because I'd already sold hormone replacement therapy in my former career in the pharmaceutical industry, I was like, hang on. It's a bit like that line in Dirty Dancing. No one's putting baby in a corner. I was like, this is not happening to me. This is not going to happen to me. And I think if I could do my time again, I'd definitely get a list of symptoms and go, no, tell me why. Tell me how all of those things are linked, because that's what I'm experiencing. But
Mm.
what I did, I went in with the worst symptom only.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course you do. Yeah.
And, I hadn't connected my dots. I remember my dentist laughing at me when I
Yeah.
said to my dentist, I think my teeth feel like they're going to fall out. He said, are you mad? And
Yeah.
that's what, it's that sort of thing. That is a recognized symptom of perimenopause now. So I
Really.
think that's really sage advice that you're giving to people. And I love the idea that, do you know what? Sometimes in the most unlikely places, like at a family party or family gathering or
Yeah.
meeting someone in a coffee shop, we can
Yeah.
have these very intuitive conversations which go, actually, do you know what? I'm going to
Yeah.
check that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, one thing that I need to say as well, because when you said, you know, like your dentist said, you're mad, and a lot of doctors, if you may tell them you are neurodivergent or they have that on their notes because there is a diagnosis, they may prescribe the symptoms to, let's say, the autism or the AUHD, ADHD, and don't let them get away with that because you know yourself best. And, you know, like if things are getting worse, then there is something going on because your autism or ADHD doesn't naturally get worse. There is something else going on, and realizing that I think is really important. And I think that's what we in our consultancy we focus on the strength of neurodivergence, not on the challenges. And one of the challenges can be that neurodivergent people are not taken seriously when they have health issues, because it's said, oh, you know, like they have mental health issues because of their ADHD, because of their autism. But the strength is also of an autistic person, for example, like me, is that I'm hypersensitive. I am very connected with my body as well. And I know when there's something going on. And it's that fighting spirit as well. And the structural thinking. And also that I always write everything down and
Yes.
prepared. And that is really important. If you want to convince somebody that you're not mad, then come with a list.
I love
Be
that.
rational about it. And I think that is a really important advice that I can give people, because I've always dealt with any kind of authority very, very professionally. I've always, when I fought for support for Callum in school, I came with documents that listed everything that was wrong, what needed to be done. I also came with solutions, because just to say what is bad is never good enough. Give your suggestions for solutions, because that shows, again, that you're not mad, that you're a very intelligent person, and that you know very well what you're talking about. So come prepared is what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so true. I think knowing that now, I know I would have been able to counter that with the loss of confidence I was experiencing. I made myself feel quite small because, of course, if everyone around you is saying
Oh,
that, you start to believe it, don't you? I mean, you've just pointed me to another lovely conversation. I love speaking to you, and we chat anyway, don't we? When we're not recording podcasts, it's lovely to speak. I mean, since then, I mean, what I will say to people is, emotionally, our hormones lie on the same motorway, if you like, as our stress hormones. So they're on the same pathway. So, we're either focusing on stress and survival strategies, or we're focusing on resting, digesting, and recreating strategies. We don't tend to do the two at the same time. It's one or the other. So,
yeah,
what we certainly know in perimenopause is if we have high levels of stress, we ultimately have low production of our sex hormones. So, Caren, I mean, you've gone from one sort of part of the continuum to the other. You've talked about how we can
yeah.
lean on things that aren't helpful to us, having come through that cycle of understanding yourself and the interplay with your hormones. What strategies do you have now that sort of keeps your stress low? Because we know that HRT is not the panacea. It's not like, do you know what? It's the
Oh,
golden answer. But and
no,
you will have some insight to that. But what
yeah.
strategies do you also overlay with your hormone replacement
Yeah,
therapy?
yeah. Like I said before, that if I understand the science behind something, that really helps me, and I always put things into perspective by writing them down. And that is sometimes just, you don't need to write down a novel about something. It can be something as simple as having a little booklet with you, and write down if you notice that there's something that is bothering you, and write it down. You put it into perspective immediately. I actually dealt with the car issue, parking in front of the house that way,
Yeah.
and I wrote down what is bothering me, why is it bothering me, what can I do differently to stop it bothering me. And so once I saw that on paper, I thought, I'm writing down about people parking in front of my house. How weird is that? That actually becomes such a problem to me that I have to write it down and deal with it and spend hours and energy on it to get that sorted. And alone that realization that I spent so much time on writing it down, like sort of dissecting it, that it just made it disappear. Now people park in front of our house and it's okay. It's okay. I still don't like it, but I certainly don't get any fits of faintness or
No, can I tell you what that's leaning into, just with my coaching hat on? What I would be saying to you, if we were in a coaching situation, I'd be saying, well, what is that an example of for you? Which value is that stepping on for you? Because what that's tuning into is like we all carry really important values, things that we hold dear to ourselves, things that
yeah,
are important to us. So there's something about that is stepping
territory,
on, triggering.
territory.
There we go. So, and maybe it's not respectful, so
Yeah,
respect.
yeah.
So, actually, people who
Mm,
are neurodivergent tend to have higher
yeah.
sensitivity to things like respect, don't
Personal
they?
space, absolutely. Oh, I can't stand it if somebody comes too close to my space. I
Yeah,
do not like that.
no,
And that was, like amplified a
yeah,
thousand times. But yes, writing things down puts things into perspective. You can also, like you just said, you can write down which, like sort of issue does this trigger?
yes.
On your triggers. It's amazing how something that simple can help you.
Yeah,
You
and I
can,
love that. And I would say the flip side to that also, because we are, when we think about the real talents and, capability of people who are neurodivergent, actually, I think it's also important to see the glimmers of the great work
yeah,
that we do too. That can balance out, actually, I'm really good at this, really good at that. I did smile when you were sort of talking about stuff. I remember having to take um, a situation where to the country town planners, people were doing stuff, behaving in a way that I felt was really unjust.
yeah,
Honestly, I think my husband thought I could have been a barrister of some sort, a solicitor. The detail, Caren, I
yeah, yeah.
cannot tell you. It was like a full-on dissertation. I had pictures, documents, references. I mean, they must have thought, has this woman not got nothing better to do? Is this her full-time job? But I was like, nope, nope, an injustice is taking place here. I'm going to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
all over. I mean, from your
absolutely.
point of view, Caren, tell us about, because you told me some lovely things when we've spoken before about the sort of strategies you have around boundaries around yourself and your work. Is there anything else you can share? Because I think that takes confidence as well during this time.
Yeah, boundaries. I mean, for example, we only work until 5 o'clock. And that's it. And we have to do that because we were at first in the position when we started our business in 2019 that we just thought we had to be there all the time. And we had to answer emails, calls immediately.
Mm,
And if we couldn't, then it had to be not within 24 hours, it had to be within 3 hours or whatever. And it just got to the point where we both, Callum and I, got really overwhelmed. And we
mm,
wanted to just please everyone. And we just sat down and we wrote it down again. And we made conscious decisions also about social media. We have no social media on your, I have an iPhone, for example. It gives you little sort of red dots when
mm.
somebody has posted and there is a notification. We switched off all notifications. We check social media when we want to check social media, not when it wants us to look at social media. And so we really have very, very strict boundaries, and also the clients we work with. If we feel that clients do not understand us, if we are not the right fit, in a way, we are interviewing the clients as well. They're interviewing us, but at the same time, we are interviewing them to see if we are a right fit. Because there is no point to work with somebody who doesn't really want the help or knows everything better. Why would they hire us otherwise? So if we get the vibe, Callum and I are both hypersensitive, that somebody is hypersensitive means very, very intuitive, very can feel things, like immediately absorb things. And like you said, with that, like coming into a room and feeling, oh, there is an atmosphere here. We are like that. And so we can tell when we can't work with somebody, and we just tell them, sorry, we are not the right people for you. So these are very, very strict boundaries that we have.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I would extend that into friendship circles as well. I don't know if you know, Karen, but there's quite a strong correlation during this midlife phase for women
Yeah.
generally to actually lots of friendships go.
Mm. Yeah.
Because actually, I think what happens is a veil moves across and we can see things for what they are. Again,
Yeah.
because our hormones, we don't tolerate as much nonsense from people. Or what we realize is there's a mismatch now between
Yeah.
people in friendships. And I found it quite liberating, I have to say,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think also the reality is, sometimes we hold on to things not knowing that they're not good for us.
Mm.
And so I think boundaries in friendships can be really powerful too. I mean, when we had a previous conversation, you'll be pleased to know I did exactly the same thing, switched off my notifications on my phone. And I know it's such an easy thing to do because, as a single business owner like yourself, you almost feel like, oh my God, I've got to be on there. But actually, if you're a highly sensitive person, it's too much. It's exhausting, and
Yeah.
I can speak from my own personal experience. By the time it would get to 8 o'clock, because I'd spent the first 2 hours of the day processing social media, it's just like too much, too much. And actually, you've lost control then.
You have. And you are a much better contractor if you have these boundaries, because you can put your full focus onto that time when you are working, and you work so much more productively, and you are much more willing to work, rather than all this, like, oh my God, I need to know, I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
do this,
It's a
do this.
compulsion. So, I mean, it's so lovely to interview you because it's so authentic and intuitive to you. You've just spoken your truth. I mean, I would say we've answered all the questions that I had. I mean, I suppose the only question that I would say is, you've explained nicely what the challenges are and the nuances that people who are neurodivergent might experience. Obviously, every person is different. Every menopause is different. So, we're not saying this is how it will be for people. But what would be your hope for the future, Karen? Like if we came back in, say, 5 years' time, when you think about neurodivergent people and their hormones, what would your hope be?
Yeah, my hope would be, especially with neurodivergent people, that they can easily disclose that they are neurodivergent and do not feel anymore that it is a stigma. Because I think one of the uh, things that are coming out now, that so many more people want to be diagnosed with ADHD or autism, is that neurodivergence is actually far more normal than we think, and that it should be seen like that as well. And that, that people that are different thinkers are actually praised for it rather than put down. And when it comes to hormonal uh, imbalances, or menopause, or in general, because it can also happen during menstruation, that people are actually more intuitive with what is happening in their bodies, that there is more information out there, more awareness, and that GPs actually get more training on it, or more understanding, and not just butt it away as, like, well but worried, as you said. That
Yeah.
that is terrible. That is terrible, and it's a failure of the service that they are supposed to be given.
I
Because when people run to the doctors, most people, 99% of people, are really unwell, and there is something not right. And you have to take that at face value. You can't just say there is nothing, like, physically to be seen. Then there may be an underlying cause, like hormones, that they are physical, actually, because they are a substance in our bodies. So there must be more to be done with hormones. And like I said, conversation should be more open around it, because I think then people can also support, we can support each other more, and that would take the pressure off the medical services as well. if
Yeah,
there's
I
more.
really agree. I've heard, and I quite like this, see what you think of this, that actually, when we think about our hormones, there is this compulsion for people to just go, okay, we just tinker around with the hormones and there's no impact. Well, to me, our sex hormones are like the percussion part of an orchestra.
Mhm.
An orchestra is lots of
Yeah,
groups of different instruments
yeah,
coming together. And so
yeah,
if we just deal with the percussion, well, what are the ramifications for the rest
yeah,
of the orchestra?
exactly,
And so,
exactly. What a
and so,
good analogy.
yeah, and
Mm.
so, we can't just tinker around over here because
No.
actually that is going to relate to our neurotransmitters. You've got things like PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. You've got
Mm.
PMS. Got
Yeah.
PMT. You've got
Mm.
all of these things. It is
Mm.
inconceivable to think the two aren't connected some way, shape, or form. And so
Absolutely.
I agree with you. I think there does need to be more awareness. I think, we're blessed. One of the blessings of social media is fact check where
Mhm.
you are getting your information from, get it from reliable sources. We're going to put some details in the show notes because I know Karen's read some great books. I know some great podcasts. We'll put reputable organizations for you. But do you know what? I would say, let's welcome the conversations. Let's join the dots for people. Let's help people find their way through it. And I think to reiterate what Karen said, I mean, the take home messages that I've written, which are many, are that, write stuff down,
Mm.
either like the
Absolutely.
symptoms and everything,
Mm.
get a tracker
Mm.
that shortcuts any time a medical professional is going to spend with you because you can go, look, here's the evidence.
Exactly. Exactly. And they will be grateful
Yeah,
as well.
I agree. I,
Mm.
I I really agree. So tell us what. So lastly, let's finish up by bringing it full circle because you have turned what could have been a
Mm.
really painful chapter in your life actually into your purpose and your passion with
Yeah.
your son, which I can't
Yeah.
think of a better way to sort of like redress that balance in society. I mean, what's exciting for you? What are your projects and things that you're focusing on in the next period of time? Because I'm sure people will want to reach out for you. What sort of things are you getting involved in?
Absolutely. We are getting more involved in putting the positive message out there about neurodivergence, particularly autism, which is our specialism. And it's all about what we have done all our lives. We have taken adversary and turned it into a positive opportunity. And I don't want to sound like something like, oh, yes, like that comes from America, because it doesn't. It comes from us. It's actually, we always have looked for the beacon of light, which you can find in anything, in any bad situation. And we want to pass that on, that it is easy to do. And so at the moment, we have developed a very, very rewarding program. It's a mentorship program for neurodivergent school leavers and people who have gone through mainstream education, and young people 16 plus and who don't know what now, because that was a very, very difficult period in our life, and
Mm.
we turned it around. And we want to, with that mentorship program, we want to show them, first of all, we call it the Empowerment, Strength and Positivity, ESP mentorship program. First of all, to be empowered, to feel in control of what is happening next and not be controlled by it. Then the next thing is focus on your strengths, not your challenges, because the education system focuses too much on weaknesses and not on the strength to overcome challenges. And that is what we want to identify, the strength of individual young people and how they can use that strength to find a way to overcome challenges, but also to find a rewarding career path, because neurodivergent people are mostly experts in their specialist interests. And if they can then combine their strength and the specialist interests into a job, they'd be the best employees that anybody can get, because they'll be fantastic. And the next thing is the positivity, to not just go through our program and then it's all nice and shiny. And yes, I've got the tools, but then, what now? To
Yeah.
let them stand on their own 2 feet, to send them away with, here is what you do when this and this happens, so that it becomes a way of living, a design for living. And that is what the positivity element is for. So to go away into the future. And that is exactly what we have gone through. So it comes from our own knowledge. And it's so exciting to help so many young people to actually go the right way, to put them on the right path, so to speak.
Yeah. And well, I'm a convert because I've already recommended you to people because I know that this works. And
Yeah,
because as a strengths coach myself, we know that strengths are motivating and energizing. And so those are critical.
yeah.
Is it by chance or deliberate that it spells out ESP, extrasensory perception? Because
That
that's
is
it.
my chance.
That's immediately the pattern I noticed there. So
Talk
extrasensory
about that.
perception, and isn't that amazing? Because
But,
for people with
yes,
autism, we
yeah,
can see things,
yeah,
and we can hear
yeah,
things before other people do. If I'm
yeah,
ever watching a
great.
film, I just watched a film last night with my husband,
Yeah,
and I'd already figured out what had happened. It was one of those very
yeah,
clever takes on something,
yeah.
and I went,
Mhm.
no, that's a skewed image of what we're seeing on the
Yeah,
film. And he was like, how do you know that? It's like, yeah, I've just seen that pattern. It's like brilliant. And it's just
yeah,
natural, isn't it? So that is
absolutely.
amazing, Caren.
Yeah, but we also do talks, of course, in
Yes.
companies and universities and colleges and schools. And we do it because we are a mother and son team. We are on stage together and
Yeah.
we do a little bit of role play. We play out scenarios that have happened to us and to entertain the audience.
Yeah. Wow.
Because these things click and then they stick. If you actually show it's like a
Yes.
story that we're telling, but at the
Yes.
same time, you're learning about a theory that we have developed ourselves. Again, it's all from lived experience, but it's not dry. It's with humor. It's with it's an experiential experience, we call it, and we do
Yes.
workshops in the same way, and we do that for teachers. We do workshops for managers. We've also run neurodiversity events. Neurodiversity Celebration Week is coming up in March from the 17th to the 21st of March. Last year, we were running an event at the Alpine Formula One team because
Wow.
Colin's specialist interest is Formula One motor racing. He's an expert in that,
Yeah.
and so we ran a full neurodiversity day with them, where we gave managers and staff members the opportunity to come and talk to us on a one-to-one basis and ask advice, which was brilliant. And then we did a lunch and learn session, which was a hybrid session, which was people were in the auditorium and other people were listening online. And we welcome questions during our performance, we call it, because it makes it more engaging, more experiential. And then we can put that into the performance, so to speak. And that is a huge success because people have got how I could say it. It's a PowerPoint fatigue,
Oh
so
yeah.
to speak. Where somebody talks at you, and then you just nod off. And we don't do that because we don't like it. And we want something to resonate. We want something that people go away and they remember what we said. And that's what it's all about. And we did that, and that was a hugely successful day, and left recommendations. We spoke to different teams. We went around all the different teams, could see how they worked, and then had neurodivergent people come to us asking for advice how they can educate their managers. And we always say, like, we have got a certain experience, but listen to yourself and do it in mind how they perceive you, because that is really important as well. You cannot just say, I am neurodivergent, so I need this and this and this doing for me. You also need to think about how can I accommodate my manager
Yeah,
better.
that's such an important, that is
It's very
lovely.
important.
That's
Yeah,
very,
very
very important.
important.
So it's meeting each other where you're
Meeting each
at.
other, exactly. And that is a big thing in our presentations, not just pointing the finger, but
No.
taking accountability and making compromises and really working together as a team.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. Well, for people watching, we're going to put all the details in the show notes. But just to say it out loud, if people want to literally go now and click and find out more about you, Caren, and the work that you and Callum do, what website or where can you signpost them just in this call right now?
Yeah. So our website is callumgamble.com, which is CALLUMGAMBLE.com. callumgamble.com. That is our autism consultancy.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And we're going to put all your other links and stuff like that in the show notes. So please go take a look. So thank you so much, Caren. I always love talking to you. It's always great. I know I'm going to see you next week anyway. But for now, thank you so much for your time and for really pulling back that curtain, as it were, on the interplay between hormones and neurodivergent people. Caren Gamble, for now, thank you.
Thank you.